Hey guys, it's me again, Eric here at Mountaintop 9. Thanks for joining me. Tonight I want to talk about the Black Sabbath album, Seventh Star from 1986. Now, for a Sabbath newcomer, for someone who's new to the Sabbath band and their career, this time period can be very frustrating and confusing because it's just so murky, all the different shit that was going on. You had Ian Gillan leaving the band and joining back up with Deep Purple in 1984, you know, after the Born Again tour wound down. He just never really was a fit for Black Sabbath, as it were. He didn't fit in, even though Ian Gillan was a rocker through and through, he didn't fit in with the whole mystical and downbeat and heavy-duty darkness that was Sabbath. He didn't really fit in with that. He didn't really feel it. You know, he even went so far as before they were going to do the Born Again tour, there's a funny story I read where Ian Gillan was looking through Tony Iommi's closet and trying on some of his black leather to see if maybe he should wear some of that on stage, but he ended up ditching that idea and just saying fuck it, and he wore whatever the hell he want. But that just kind of shows you that he wasn't really feeling all that darkness and all the dingy atmosphere that was Black Sabbath. It just wasn't his thing. So he was excited to go off and get back into Deep Purple. So that kind of left Sabbath once again without a vocalist. Now, the only person from the original lineup around this time, even though they did try to get Bill Ward back again after the Born Again tour, they tried to get Bill back, and Geezer was still hanging around, of course. At this point in 84 and 85, they were on the search again for another lead vocalist. Now, different people came and went at the time as far as auditioning and maybe doing a few rehearsals. People like David Donato, Ron Keel, Jeff Fenholt, but these people never became members of Black Sabbath. They were just people that auditioned and maybe reached various stages of, you know, like doing some rehearsals with Sabbath, but they never became full members. One really amusing anecdote that I learned by reading Black Sabbath books was that none other than Michael Bolton actually sent Sabbath an audition tape during this, somewhere during this period between 83 and 85. Somewhere in there, Michael Bolton wanted to try out for Black Sabbath. Now, can you imagine that fucking guy singing for Black Sabbath? I don't know, man. Kind of crazy, kind of crazy. I'm guessing that back then in the early 80s, he was probably more of a rocker type dude, but definitely a long way from what he ended up becoming. You know, he did all this sappy romantic bullshit, a pop kind of guy. But yeah, they say that Michael Bolton actually sent in an audition tape. Crazy stuff. Eventually, Geezer got, you know, kind of fed up with trying to carry on the Black Sabbath name, so he ended up exiting the band. He wanted to start his own solo thing and wanted to be near his young son, who I think had some health problems. Now, the only original founding member left of Black Sabbath was Tony Iommi. He was all alone now. All of them were gone. The only guy he had by his side was his trusty sidekick, the keyboard playing Jeff Nichols. And this guy was just a fabulous contributor to Black Sabbath throughout all of this era. Really, you can't make light of his contributions to Sabbath. He really played well with Tony as far as bouncing ideas off of each other. And who knows how much he really contributed on the lyric front as well as the music front. From what I've read, the doses of new material, the blood that he injected into Sabbath was quite notable. So Jeff Nichols cannot be underestimated as far as the history of Sabbath is concerned. So him and Tony would sit around doing lines of coke, trying to figure out what the fuck they were going to do next. And one of the things I remember reading from Tony Iommi in an interview at that time was that he really wanted to find a British singer again. He didn't want an American singer. He wanted someone that didn't have much of an ego problem, that it could be a guy that you could get along with and that was hungry for success. He didn't want someone who had already made it and had a reputation and had handlers and all this shit surrounding him. He wanted someone who was hungry and ready to be in a band and prove himself. That's what Tony was looking for at the time. So yeah, they kept doing auditions, and also at this time, he was carrying on a relationship. His girlfriend at the time was Lita Ford. Now, he ended up taking some band members from Lita Ford. He took his new drummer that he was jamming with was Eric Singer. He came from Lita Ford's band, and also the bass player, Dave Spitz, came from Lita Ford's band. So he was jamming with these guys, and of course he had Jeff Nichols on the keyboards. And one of Tony's ideas at this time was, instead of doing a Black Sabbath album, he thought to himself, I just want to do a solo record. You know, this whole Black Sabbath thing is going nowhere right now. This is in 1985. I've tried to get singers in, it's just not working. I get people in for auditions, but they just can't cut it in one manner or another. Either they have a fucking ego, or they can't sing, or whatever the case, or they can't contribute as far as writing goes. So I'm just going to do a Tony Iommi solo project. I'm going to do an album and then maybe tour under the banner of Tony Iommi. We'll just leave Sabbath on ice for now. Well, so what his idea is, and this is something that later came to fruition in the late 90s, early 2000s, you know, somewhere, I think it was in 1999 or in 2000 when the Iommi solo album thing came out, where he had guest singers, you know, all kinds of people on that. But in 1985, his idea was to have people like Dio, Rob Halford, David Coverdale, names like that. He wanted to get them in on this album and sing on different tracks. All of the songs would be music he wrote and performed, but he was going to have a bunch of guest singers, and those were some of the names bandied about. Halford, Coverdale, even Robert Plant, I think he wanted on this album. Well, of course, this didn't end up working out. What happened is Glenn Hughes entered the picture, came down to the studio with them, and he laid down a couple tracks with Iommi. Iommi really liked what he heard on these tracks that Glenn Hughes sang on, and I think he had a conversation with Don Arden, who was, you know, head of the record company who Iommi was signed to. And next thing you know, Glenn Hughes finds himself singing on the whole goddamn album. Well, for Hughes, this was no problem at all. He had no problem contributing to a Tony Iommi solo album. They worked well together. Everything was going good, and that chemistry is exemplified by the fact that later on, Hughes ended up working with Iommi again, and they did 2 more good recordings. You had the DEP sessions, and you had the Fused album. So right away, these two hit it off, gelled really well. So they go into the studio, they record. The guy producing the album is named Jeff Glixman. Now this guy is a special name for me because he worked with one of my other favorite bands in the 1970s, and that band is Kansas. So he did some legendary work with Kansas in the 70s, and, you know, did some other stuff as well. So he's a notable name in the rock industry. Now, Hughes did not like working with Glixman, according to interviews that I've read. He thought that Jeff Glixman spread a lot of gossip and would try to pit Tony and him against each other and just tried to stir things up in the studio. So Glenn wasn't very fond of working with Jeff, well, as far as that's concerned. But overall, the recording sessions were mostly uneventful. There wasn't a lot of drama other than the fact that there was a lot of drug abuse going on. I mean, you had Tony and Jeff both did coke. Glenn Hughes had a drug problem at the time. He was doing a lot of coke, plus he had a weight problem. I guess he was eating a lot of candy bars and just indulging in all this stuff. He was over 200 pounds, very bloated. And then Glixman, the producer, was zonked out of his head on drugs, according to what I've read. So, just a lot of drugs going on at that time, as you can see. They finished recording the album, and after the album was all done, Tony goes up for a meeting with the record company, and they basically say, hey, here's the deal. We don't really want you calling this Tony Iommi. We want you to go under the Black Sabbath banner. Simply because under the Black Sabbath name, you'll have radio and record company promotion. There'll be, you know, billboards and radio airplay and more money poured into the project. Not to mention, you'll be playing to arena crowds. If you go out under the name Tony Iommi, you're going to be playing theaters. So which is it? Do you want a lot of promotion and money and a lot of superstar type handling where you're playing in front of arenas, or do you want to start from scratch somewhat and go out playing to theater-sized crowds and less promotion? Well, to Tony, it was a fucking no-brainer. So here it was again. This finished album was going to be called Black Sabbath, but with one caveat. It was going to be called Black Sabbath, and in smaller writing underneath that, featuring Tony Iommi. So Black Sabbath featuring Tony Iommi, and then the album's called Seventh Star. This news was, to Glenn Hughes, sheer horror. He thought that he was singing on a Tony Iommi solo album. He had no intentions of ever singing on a Black Sabbath album, let alone going out on stage in front of 15,000 heavy metal fans and singing songs like War Pigs and Heaven and Hell and stuff like this, because that wasn't in Glenn Hughes' nature at all. The thought of it had him shaking in his boots. He was a soulful singer, more from a R&B background, a hard rock type of thing, but definitely not metal in the least. That's not what he wanted. He didn't feel like that was his forte or where he could really shine. He did not feel comfortable in this situation. He felt like these people were going to be judging him, and you know, he has this really bad drug problem. He's eating a lot of food. He feels very low self-esteem. He feels like he looks terrible. He's overweight, and all of a sudden he's got to go out and sing in arenas under the name Black Sabbath. This idea terrified him to no end, so of course he did more and more drugs. And to make matters worse, he only ended up doing 5 shows with Black Sabbath before he had to be replaced by Ray Gillen. Right before the tour kicked off, Glenn Hughes was out drinking at a pub with Black Sabbath's stage manager, a guy named John Downey. Him and this guy, they were having some drinks, and then they either went back to a hotel or an apartment or whatever, and they were doing lines of coke. Well, one thing led to another, and I guess Glenn knew that this guy had more cocaine on him. So he was asking this guy, John Downey, he was saying, hey, give me another line, I need some more. The guy wouldn't give him any more, so Glenn became more and more belligerent. He got more pissed off. He probably got in the guy's face a little. And the next thing you know, this John Downey guy slugged Glenn Hughes right in the fucking face. And I mean super hard. So hard that it fractured his eye socket. And it pushed it in right onto his sinuses and fucked up his nose. And what this injury did is it caused all kinds of blood and mucus to drain down into his throat and just clog up down in there over his vocal cords. And it made it so that he couldn't even sing. So you got a feel for Glenn Hughes at this point. He was already feeling overwhelmed by this, having to sing for Black Sabbath, and he's overweight, and he has a drug problem. Now he's got all this blood down his throat. He can't even sing. He can't perform anymore. He's got to go out and try to sing, and he can't. So he's out there a lot of the time just kind of miming the lyrics, and Jeff Nichols is backstage, you know, helping in the background. And he just wasn't cutting it. And it was a really sad end of that tenure that he had there with the band. So they brought in Ray Gillen to replace him, and you know, that really pissed off Glenn Hughes. He didn't like being replaced like that, but he understood. But now that we've kind of talked about all of the stress and anxiety and mania that surrounded the making of this album, the before, the after, let's get into the album itself and look at it track by track. The first track, In for the Kill, opens up with a thunderous blitz of drum work from new guy Eric Singer. Then Tony Iommi enters the picture like a wild, rampaging, stampeding line of elephants. His riff is hard and heavy, and it's nice and chugging. And when the cymbals crash and they meet certain sections of the guitar, it's like heavy metal Cloud 9. It just takes you to another level. This is how Black Sabbath would open albums back then. They were on a great streak with this kind of thing. Those up-tempo, fast, heavy numbers. Glenn Hughes has some wonderful vocal harmonies in this song, and his voice truly soars above the fray that's pounding away beneath him. It's really stellar stuff. He sounds full of vigor, just really great, full of energy. He's got that great soulful delivery, and he's belting out the lines with conviction. And the lyrics are very much in a heavy metal vein. Even though he didn't think he was writing for a Black Sabbath album, this song is still very much in the Black Sabbath mold, I would say. So I guess it kind of proves that you could try to take Tony Iommi out of Black Sabbath, but you could never take the Black Sabbath out of Tony Iommi. This is a great opener for a Black Sabbath album. No Stranger to Love is up next, and this one, the beginning of it, is very reminiscent of Die Young from Heaven and Hell. Jeff Nichols, his keyboards in this one, they build this really thick wall of lush atmosphere, and it's this backdrop over which Tony Iommi lays down some very tasteful lead guitar notes. And then when Glenn Hughes starts singing, you'll notice right away, hey, this is what they call a power ballad, I guess. And you know what? I fucking love it. I mean, there is no shame in liking a song like this. I love the emotion that Glenn Hughes brings to the vocals. Just so soulful and heartfelt. You can really feel the emotion move you in this song. It's just, and the production, this is where Jeff Glicksman really worked wonders, because this is great 80s ear candy right here. This is just a catchy song, and like I said, pure 80s. Can someone just build a fucking time machine and take me back to that time period? Because that's where so much of the music I love was from back then. That's for damn sure. Turn to Stone is the third track, and this one is just so-so. It's a lackluster song, if you will. It's filler material. There's nothing wrong with it, it just isn't anything to stand up and shout about. I do like the fact that the main riff, for some reason, it just seems to have a Kill the King type flavor to it. And if you listen to it, you can probably hear it too. If you've never noticed it on your own, go back, listen to it again. Now you'll probably think that every time you hear it. I hear kind of a Kill the King type flavor to it. Of course, that song is one of Rainbow's all-time classics. This song, of course, comes nowhere near the grand piece of music that that track is. But yeah, Turn to Stone, it's a fast song. It's another up-tempo one. So, you know, this is one that you blink and you'll miss it. It speeds by in a hurry, so not good, but not bad either. Track 4, Sphinx the Guardian. All it is a windswept keyboard instrumental thing. It's really moody and evocative, and the only purpose that it serves is to serve as a prelude to the 5th track, and that is the album's centerpiece, 7th Star. This one has a nice winding riff from Tony Iommi. It has a very mystical feel to it. And when you listen to this song, it really kind of goes along with the album's cover photo, where you see Tony Iommi standing out in the middle of the fucking desert, and he looks really forlorn and lost. You know, that little picture right there. Well, that's what this song kind of makes you, it kind of goes with that picture. Also, another thing I like about it, it does have a nice little lead break in it that reminds me of moody stuff that Tony did in tracks like You Won't Change Me from Technical Ecstasy and Lonely Is the Word from Heaven and Hell. It's got a little bit of that mood to it, but it's very brief. There's not a long lead section in this song, and that's unfortunate because he really could have done a lot of mysterious and evocative lines in this song just because of the nature of it. You know, another song on this album, Heart Like a Wheel, it has long extended solos from Iommi, but that song doesn't really have any atmosphere. It's based around a very simple blues pattern, and it's kind of a boring track. This song I wish would have had much more soloing from Iommi. Would have been amazing probably, because as far as the vocals go, Hughes is way too restrained on this song. This song didn't lend itself, I guess, to very many vocal acrobatics. So he's real restrained, and to me, this song just kind of misses the mark. It doesn't have that X factor. But the next track, track number 6 that's coming up, gives this album a massive jolt, a massive shot in the arm. And that song is Danger Zone. And man, oh man, when you hear the opening riff to this song, from the second you hear it, you know, goddamn, Tony Iommi has done it once again. Whether it be a song like Hole in the Sky, or Symptom of the Universe, or Country Girl, or whatever it may be, a litany of other examples, because he is the riff master. This is just another example of how he could open a song with one of the catchiest riffs you've ever heard. I would have loved to have been in the room when Tony came up with stuff like this. Can you imagine the goosebumps that would just sprout up on your arm, the way your hair might stand on end, just the chill that would go down your spine, standing in the same room with this man when he was coming up with some of this classic material. And this is a perfect example of that. It's a classic riff. It's a driving, catchy riff. And over top of this, you have Glenn Hughes coming back in, and he is unrestrained here. He is let go, full throttle. This is unadulterated passion that is seething from this man's vocal pipes right here. And the lyrics, they sound very genuine and heartfelt and autobiographical. You know, he was going through all these problems with drugs and everything at the time. And so these lyrics seem to be coming from a deep, personal place, and I like that about this song. It makes it feel authentic. I love the bridge section when Hughes is saying, the way he delivers the lines, ain't gonna feel no hurt, ain't gonna feel no pain. The way he sings those lines is just magical. And you know, when they brought in Ray Gillen, he did not deliver the lines in the soulful, beautiful way that Hughes did. This man really owns this track, okay? And I can't imagine anyone else singing this song. It's a classic Sabbath song through and through. This has always been one of my favorites. So if there is one song, if I only could recommend one song from Seventh Star, it would be Danger Zone. It gets me every time. It's a great track. Heart Like a Wheel is the next track, and this kind of dips back down in quality here because it's not even really a true song in my opinion. This one is just another filler thing taking up space on the album, and its only purpose is so that Tony can do some extended lead sections. Except, like I said, it's just this basic blues pattern underneath that's not really that remarkable. It's not memorable. It's not, doesn't have like a melancholy mood to it or a sinister mood or anything like that. It's just a generic backdrop over which he's doing some soloing. And I love Tony's playing. Nothing makes me happier than hearing that man play leads. But it's just not, this track just is boring. It just doesn't do much for me. So this one, Heart Like a Wheel, you can skip this one because we're nearing the end of our journey here, and something tells me that what's coming up is truly remarkable. And here we are, folks, the last two tracks, Angry Heart and In Memory. And to me, these two tracks are really like one song combined because they really meld together in such a beautiful way. Angry Heart is up first, and the main verse to this song, the main riff, very much has a deep purple flair to it. You can really feel a deep purple influence on this one. Also, the lyrics are just so sorrowful and just feel like they have so much pining and anguish to them. They're very emotional lyrics from Hughes on this, and his singing is great, as usual, as he has been the whole record. And yeah, Angry Heart is just a great rock song. Tony's riff on Angry Heart is heavy and driving, and ultimately it leads to the cleanly picked opening notes of In Memory. And this song to me is very powerful, and it's one of my favorites on the album. My two favorite sections of Seventh Star are Danger Zone and then this ending part here where we have Angry Heart and In Memory. This song is just so relatable in the way that everything around us is so transitory, that all of our experiences are just leading to an inevitable outcome that we can't control, that we're all going to eventually die one day. And that also when we lose someone that we're close to, you know, there's that grief, that profound sense of loss that just never truly goes away. And the way that Glenn Hughes is singing these lines to this song, they're sung in such a heart-wrenching way that it really touches you. So it's just a very powerful song. When Hughes sings lines like, "It still haunts me, there's a silence where you used to be," it's just a gut punch, man, because the music underneath, these notes that Tony is playing, they're very melancholy. They're very much full of misery and loss. So they complement the lyrics and the vocals very well. And it just sends this album out on a downbeat, depressing note. And, you know, Black Sabbath were great at doing that. You know, they did it 2 albums in a row. With Heaven and Hell, you had Lonely is the Word, and then on Mob Rules, you had Over and Over. So this song, that's very much in that vein, because it sends you out on a downer of a note, man, for sure. And the funny thing about this track was when they were in the studio recording it, different guys were submitting lyrical ideas to this album all the way through. Glenn Hughes wrote quite a bit of the lyrics for this album, but there were also contributions lyrically from Jeff Nichols here and there, and also Jeff Glicksman, the producer. Every now and then, I think he might have been helping out in the lyric department. And one of the things that was funny about In Memory was Jeff Glicksman wanted this song to be about his dog that had died. Okay, he wanted this song to be about his dog that had died. And then Tony Iommi's father had just died, and that was a crushing blow to him. I think that was a very, you know, anytime someone's father dies, I mean, you can't imagine how, you know, what the sense of loss that you must feel. Ultimately, you can extrapolate the lyrics from this song In Memory and the lyrics from Angry Heart, and I feel that they are universal in nature. They can be whatever you want them to be about. They're still about a universal thing. They're about death. They're about, you know, loss, pining for a search for answers. Like in Angry Heart, it just feels like this guy that's just lost and searching for something more and just feeling depressed and angry at life. You know, this kind of stuff is universal, because the lyrics to songs like Angry Heart and In Memory are timeless. They will never lose their meaning and their ability to capture the listener's imagination and to tug at their heart along the way. So yeah, that's about all I have to say about this album. Overall, I think that Seventh Star is a solid album. I don't know that I wouldn't call it a masterpiece, but it is a very, very good album. It's got a few great tracks on it. The tracks that I think are great are Danger Zone and Angry Heart and In Memory. In for the Kill is a really good track. No Stranger to Love is a really good track. So, you know, it's got a couple filler things here and there. But overall, I like Seventh Star quite a lot. I put it on a semi-regular basis. I listen to this album every few months, and when I put it on, I crank it up loud. Also, I want to add something real quick. I kind of didn't like, looking back on the Tony Martin rant and on the Ronnie James Dio rant, one thing that bothers me about those videos is the fact that I didn't get to do each album track by track and go into great detail about each album. They kind of tried to throw too much in at once, and I tried to cover everything in one video. That's almost impossible to do. So if you guys are interested in this idea, if you like how I'm doing track by track reviews, please let me know in the comments if you would like me to go back and do each Tony Martin album individually and dive in and explore each track. And the same thing with the Dio albums, track by track. Let me know if you want me to go back and revisit all of those, because I really feel like Obviously, I expressed my love for those eras in those videos, but I don't think I got to go all out and really dive into each individual album. And if you would like to see me do that, let me know in the comments, because I'm really feeling strongly like I should do that. Because from here on out, whenever I do music reviews, I'm going to do them all this way, track by track, because I think that's the best way to do an album justice. Now, if you enjoyed this video, please click like. Please leave me a comment, let me know whatever it is you're thinking, and if you're new to my channel, click subscribe, because I'd love to see you watch more of my videos. I've got new ones coming up all the time. I make them as fast as I can. And thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you again next time.